Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for listening in. Today, we're going to talk about strategies to educate your children about investing. But before we do, as a reminder, this is an educational show and should not be construed as personal financial advice. Full disclosure information is available at ototnow.com. Now, let's get started. All right, what can you do to teach those little versions of yourself about money, saving, and investing? Well, the topic is a huge one, but it is a question that I get asked all the time. So I'm going to cover some very basics up front of maybe if that resonates with you, you can have that conversation with your kids. And then I'll talk to some specific strategies for investing that my parents did for me, and it got me to where I am today. And I highly recommend that you do that as well. But we'll get to that towards the end. So let's start with a basic overview of your kids and their relationship with money. Well, number one, first and foremost, like with anything else in life, they are learning by example from you. So knowing that, what sort of example are you setting? They're always listening, they're always watching, and money habits, just a little bit, from how often you go shopping, or are you constantly talking about budgeting in your household? Are you talking about investing in your household, or do you not talk about money at all? Because if you don't talk about it at all, that kind of leaves them with a void. Maybe they have to learn in other places if you really don't ever have money conversations around the house. But your relationship with money is the number one teaching tool you have, and the more open you have that conversation with as a family, the more they're going to hear and kind of pick up at least what your philosophy is and your relationship is with money. So that's number one, is set a good example around the house. And saving and investing is often just basic discipline. So, and we call it financial discipline in the industry, but it's the same discipline that you have in your workplace, or with your health, or spiritually, or making things a priority as a family. The more you add that kind of structure to your life, and the more you talk about priorities and things that, hey, we want to make sure that we do this, that will help them understand the discipline involved to be successful in saving and investing. So I always encourage folks, I speak to kids quite a bit, and I'm like, hey, play a sport, get involved, compete. It doesn't have to be a sport. It can be band, choir, chess club. It can be involved in any activity, but get out and compete, because as you do that, you will have to have some discipline in order to make yourself better at whatever your particular venture is. And secondly, you need to go out and, as a kid, in my opinion, you need to win and lose, right? And especially you need to win some games that you should have lost and lose some games that you should have won. So you can kind of get this picture of that's how life really is. And, it's not fair. So, kids, at least from my day, always used to say, hey, this isn't fair. And it's just like, well, good. I'm glad you finally got the point, because no, it's not fair. No matter how much we try to make things fair, life just isn't fair. And that sets them up with a financial structure of discipline of what it takes to be successful, and also with the understanding that it doesn't also always work out exactly like you thought it should. So that is a really good foundation to have in your kids as far as any venture, and of course that parlays over to money. So all parents are different on what your thoughts are on allowances and chores. And my wife and I have gone back and forth on our thoughts on this as well. And we decided that we don't actually go with an allowance. Allowance kind of seems like it's a money for nothing sort of thing. And then there's, of course, the chores that need to be done around the house. I know some parents think, well, you live here, you do some chores because you're going to help out. Okay, I buy that. We're kind of along that lines ourselves. However, I have a lot of really good friends that have the chore chart up there, and then I have one of them that even auctions off the chores to the different kids. That bid down the price by the kids bidding on the chore, so it's kind of brilliant. But that any of those conversations, no matter how you do it, you need to involve your kids with money at an early age. And I like to tell folks that the real first time your child gets involved in like an open market experiment or experience, if you will, is with their lunch. You pack them a lunch or you give them money to buy lunch from the school. Well, guess what? That's an open market for their 35 minutes or 25 or 45 or whatever it is when they're in elementary school, and they all have their little assigned seats at the table. And guess what? Bartering 101, right? Mom always packs the same peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and I don't have the self-esteem to be able to tell her I actually don't like that, so I trade it every single day. That's an example, not life experience of my own, but it's whatever they have in their lunches. There's a lot of trading going on. And of course, young entrepreneurs would bring an extra dessert or an extra candy bar or whatever, one to eat and one to trade, or sell. You could be doing it for cash as well. So that's often, where they start to understand and assign some value to things as far as what it's worth to somebody else. As they get a little bit older, you get into the teen years, and what I think, and my oldest is about to drive next month, and we actually already got her car. So we're having some of these conversations, and she asked me one day, she goes, "Well, Dad, do I have to pay for my own gas?" And I kind of chuckled, and because I hadn't really thought about that. But it was oh, sweetheart, if you only knew that gas is like the least of your worries with the car. It's insurance and maintenance, and it's all the other things. So that's when we broke into like about a 20-minute discussion of, well, you're kind of helping your mom and I out by having a car, and you can take yourself around to different areas. And, that saves us from being the taxi cabs that we've been for the past 16 years. So you're helping us there. So in that way, we of course should cover your gas. But then I also said, but if you're going to start taking your car to the South Padre 7 hours from here, and you're doing that every weekend, well, I'm not going to fund that little lifestyle. So that would be on you. So just kind of thinking about like, hey, look, while you're in high school, yeah, we're going to cover that. Other parents don't, and I totally get that. But but then when you're off to college, it's probably going to be on you. But to each their own. But at least that's when teens can get involved with some of the ideas of money and what it takes to fund your lifestyle. And then the last one is credit card usage. You might give your kids a credit card, you might not. Both of our daughters are involved in club sports, so they're often with their friends. They're often not with us. They're often with other parents. And of course, it's not fair just to pawn your kid off to another parent and have them pay for their, Chewies or whatever their, that's a Mexican restaurant here, not the dog food company, but for having them to pay for that. So kids can be self-sufficient having a credit card. But there's also some problems with that. We have had to remove the credit card from a child before for overspending on it. So just some strategies to think about. And then the last one is, and this is kind of about saving and investing. So how do we get to that investing at an early age? Kids can have their own brokerage accounts. Some say this can try to put them in names, and we'll talk about specific strategies here in a second. But yeah, share a Disney. People can resonate. Okay, I understand Disney movies. I grew up probably watching the Disney Channel. I may or may not have been to one of the theme parks, but they can kind of understand what it is. Or Apple. Apple shares are a lot more expensive, but something they can resonate with. And if you can do a monthly contribution, there are some tax concerns with them having their brokerage account. Since they're minors, it kind of rolls over to your taxes. So some things to think about. And then of course, once they have earned income, then you can do retirement accounts for them. And that's really how my parents set me up for success, but I'll tell that story here in a minute. Okay. One conversation I definitely recommend having with kids and adults sometimes is if somebody gives you $1 or you go to work and you earn $1, there's 3 things that happen to that dollar. You can consume it, meaning, no, you don't eat the dollar, but you consume it through living your life, which includes, housing, food, travel, stuff, probably too much stuff in most of our cases, right? But you're basically spending that dollar on something. And for a lot of people, if they make a certain amount, they actually spend more than amount. Credit cards enable that sort of behavior. So they're actually consuming more than they're making, and then they get into a debt spiral, and that can lead to a lot of misery that you don't want to pass on to your kids. So if you're learning that particular thing, then make sure you fix it and don't pass that habit on. But back to the 3 results of $1, you can either consume it, which spend is what I say to kids, because they always laugh when I say that. Oh, or you can save, so you can spend it, you can save it, or you can invest it. Now, when you think of basics of financial planning, you spend what you have to spend to get by, and then save until you have 3 to 6 months of emergency fund. I think that's a little much depending on your income. It can be, if you have a really small income, it could be not enough, but you can tailor that number. You kind of save that money, and then you look to invest the rest, whether it's stock market, real estate, invest in yourself, go get more degrees, more education, that sort of thing. So that's how I explain that to kids. And then when I say, okay, there's only one chart that you need to think of to be rich or to be wealthy beyond your means, and it's just a simple dollars on the y-axis going up. X is time across the bottom. So you have dollars on the left, time across the bottom, and then you simply draw one line. And I draw a straight line, even though it's not always a straight line, and say, this is your life, this is income, right? Income on that line. Now your expenses is the only other line on the chart. And I say, if it's below your income, you'll be rich your entire life. You will never have to worry about money. If your expenses exceed that income line, especially if it stays there for any significant amount of time, you're going to be poor and you're going to be miserable. So it doesn't matter what you make. You may, an extreme example, you're a phenomenal athlete and you step into a high-paying sport like football, and you may get a multi-million-dollar contract at the age of 21. Or you may be like most people and work for an hourly wage or a small salary, either out of high school or out of college, and whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Wherever that line is, you need to spend less than that. That's it. That's all you have to know. There, you're welcome. And so I tell that to kids, and then probably a lot of people need a reminder of that sometime. Some folks always ask me, what's the largest key to success? And I think this is good for kids to know, and that's get married exactly once. A lot of times you don't have a lot of choice in that, but certainly be very selective in that decision in your life, and then do what it takes to invest the time and effort to maybe make that work your whole life. Running into issues in the marriage and divorce can be very expensive, and you can take and some of you are probably nodding your heads out there saying, preach, right? So if you start taking things that are whole and cutting them in half, well, that can be tough. It can be disastrous, actually, financially. And the last one is, I always talk with kids about what's really happening when you use a credit card. All you're doing every time you ring up the credit card, if you're spending future dollars. So you're robbing yourself, really. You're going to yourself that's a year older and taking money away from your future self, going, you don't need that because you're in the future, but it's you. So you're robbing yourself, and you're spending it now. Well, guess what? If you spend your future dollars now, that's right, kids, you have less future dollars. So as you talk to your kids about credit card usage and that sort of thing, it's like, don't think it's magic. Back to the old days of writing a check, it's like, well, I have checks left in the checkbook, so clearly there's got to be money in the account. It's like, no, that's not true. Those are very separate things. So just something to hopefully, if any of those four things help with your conversation with kids, I think just having the conversation is going to be helpful versus not having it, and maybe something resonates with your children. Kind of transitioning from the basics of money over into the market itself, and if you're going to have a child invest, you kind of want to just take the mystery out of it. So they understand. So when they do get that first job and somebody from HR goes, here, fill this out for your 401k, they have some idea what's being talked about. You can talk about profits and losses or risk and reward, stocks, bonds. You don't have to be exactly right. You don't have to be in the industry to do this. You can give your own explanation. And just like all the ads say, there's no perfect parent, but there's parent, any parent that's trying is doing very well. So kind of give them an idea. If you put them in a stock that they understand, then maybe that will resonate with them. But you're really looking back to the discipline, the exposure, and the habit patterns over time that will help them succeed later in life. And so I will kind of break into what my parents did for me and kind of how they did it. So my parents back, told me when I was a kid, for as long as I can remember, as young as I can remember, that my job was to go to school and get good grades. And I said, okay, I can do that. Was very blessed with a good, strong ability to learn. I was an only child, so I had like zero distractions. I kind of lived out in the country, kind of didn't have friends, but read a lot of books and was able to do really well in school because I certainly was able to focus my effort. But the point there is that when I was 16 or 17, I don't remember exactly when, I think it was when I was 16, my parents said, it was after my junior year of high school, and I was pretty young for my age group. And they said, well, you need to get a job. And I said, up, time, right? I'm a kid. So I'm like, hand went up. It's like, you said that my job is to get good grades. I've been doing that and I've been doing very well. So why am I going out and getting another job, which, no kidding, was a literal, I worked at a professional golf course and the tennis course there in Cincinnati. And guess where the entry-level job was? I had to make I had to make coffee in the morning for golfers, which are a unique bunch of individuals. You know, they have high expectations of their coffee. And I'm a kid and I don't even drink coffee, so how am I supposed to make it right all the time? Anyway, I had to make coffee, and after I'm done with that, I had to go around in a golf cart and clean the bathrooms. It's like, yeah, okay. Part of that's good life experience to kind of understand why I might not want to do that when I'm 40. But the real point of it financially was that they said, you go out and make some money, whatever that is, and we will match that amount of money into your retirement account. And I'm a kid, so I'm like, don't know what that is. I'm like, but it did sound like free money. So if you try to explain it and you're not getting anywhere, just say free money. And it's like, okay, kids understand free money. So they took that and they let me keep whatever I earned, even though it was like $800 or something in the summer. And back then the max for the accounts were $2,000 a year. Now they're up to $6,000 a year. So as long as you have earned income, you can start an IRA. So they, you know, I went off and worked. I kept that money and I spent it, or I consumed it, or saved it, or whatever. I didn't care. But they started me in investing, and it was with USAA because my parents were military, like I was former military, and Cornerstone Fund, which is kind of the pick a mutual fund and go with that. So this is the 80s. So mutual funds were kind of just getting to the mainstream, and you bought that and you just let it watch it grow over time. Well, to do that, you have to have a custodial account. So now back to talking to you as a parent, how would you do this? Any brokerage firm that you use, you know, I use Schwab and TD Ameritrade myself, but hey, anybody can do this. It's the law. All you need is a custodial account. So technically the account's in your name as the custodian. So you make the decisions in the account, but it's in the child's name as far as it's under their social security number. And it doesn't become theirs until they turn either 18 or 21, depending on the law in your state. It's 21 in Texas. And then that account transitions to them. Obviously, if it's an IRA, it's going to transition to them anyway. But if it's a brokerage and they can't, you know, turn around and sell it. But if they do have a regular brokerage account, you know, when it turns 18 or 21, they can actually turn around and sell that. So depending on the maturity of your child, may or may not do that. There's also tax issues, which I ran into. So, you know, I opened them up for my kids some time ago, and all of a sudden I'm having to pay extra tax on their earnings because they've made money. You know, making money is a good thing. And paying taxes is part of that. So just realize that there's a kiddie tax out there. So if you were to start getting into the $10,000 and up kind of accounts for them, you might want to either take the time to educate yourself or talk to a pro about the tax implications of that. But if you're going to a retirement account, then certainly you don't have to do that. But what I will close with here today is, you know, kind of another thing I like to tell kids, or really adults or whoever, it's just like, well, what do I, you know, and the show's called On Time on Target. So what do I need to do to be a millionaire? And you can make your jokes that a million's not what it used to be due to inflation, but, you know, hey, that's a goal. I think if you have a financial goal as a young person, just like I want to be a millionaire, it's very achievable. And I say it takes 2 steps, 2 things, the only 2 things you have to do. Invest $250 a month and wait 40 years. So the math on that is if I invest $250 a month, that's $3,000 a year. And if I do that for 40 years, well, that's obviously $120,000. So, Mr. Smart Guy, how is that a million? Well, you've also had 40 years of compounding interest the whole time. So that's where you can teach kids the time value of money. You can show them the chart, some that resonates with some people. Otherwise, just say $250 a month for 40 years. That's pretty good. Well, if you start at 15 or 16, then obviously you're in your 50s when that happens. Or if you can set more than $250 a month, then obviously you will be there a lot sooner. So that's what you can kind of explain to them about the time value of money. But obviously starting earlier is better. And if you can start IRAs for your kids, do the little research to make sure that it's the right thing, and you don't want to give them money if you're not set up yourself. You know, haha, there's no retirement loans. So don't put everything into your kids, but that's how you can get everybody, that's how you can at least start the conversation with your kids or set them up for success. All right, so that's all we have for today's episode. Hopefully you got something out of that you can use as a parent. Please reach out through ototnow.com with any questions or comments. Thanks again for listening, and here's to you fighting the good fight every day to be on time, on target with your financial goals. Bye.